our healthcare is over double any other nation.
Yeah.
And our health outcomes are worse.
Yeah.
So eventually that equation has to change. And I think there's going to be, and I guess my question is like, what is a business's role to help change that equation for their employees?
Join me as I sit down with Jordan Lynch, founder and CEO of Pursuit Health, a company aimed at improving healthcare outcomes for employees, as we discuss his new business venture and his approach to faith, family, and travel.
Our philosophy very early on was we want to bring our boys and our kids into the things that we really love. And so travel was that way right from the start. We brought our oldest to Barcelona and Belgium when he was 5 months old.
Jordan will also be sharing his fitness routines and approach to doing tough things, while he also discusses his preparations for his upcoming fitness competition in Germany.
The sauna and the cold plunge, like I said, this gym space. And some of it is certainly just like things that I'm really into, but it's also being a parent of 4 boys and feeling like kids need to see their dads do hard things. When they came to watch me do a high rocks and they're following me from station to station to station and cheering me on and seeing what it's like to see their dad do something really hard and challenging himself, those are the things that I think really stick with them.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Before we get started, if you could hit the like, subscribe, or follow button on whichever platform you're consuming today's show.
Off and running.
Off and running.
This is awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for joining, Jordan. Really appreciate it. Just kind of dive right in. What are you most excited about right now?
Gosh, I am definitely most excited about the upcoming trip that we have planned as a family. We're headed to Spain for 3 months, and it's kind of like a family study abroad experience with Boundless Life. So our 4 boys, ages 10, 9, 6, and 3, will be doing school abroad, and then we'll be traveling with 30 other families from around the globe and living in south of Spain for 3 months.
Jeez, sounds incredible. I think about a few families I know. The idea of traveling with little children would be like a non-starter, right? Like they almost think it's impossible to even consider traveling abroad. And for you, this experience, this trip you're going on, this isn't the first one you've done. You've done quite a few. So what are some of the other trips you went on previously prior to this?
So we've done 6 weeks in Portugal. We did 3 weeks in Spain and Iceland and Puerto Rico and Costa Rica. And really, our philosophy ever since our oldest was born was that travel was something that we as a couple really found valuable to our relationship, as well as just like who we are as people. And so our philosophy very early on was we want to bring our boys and our kids into the things that we really love. And so travel was that way right from the start. We brought our oldest to Barcelona and Belgium when he was 5 months old.
Yeah.
So right away we started traveling, and I think increased it every year since over the last 10 years.
That's really incredible. For you, like what do you get out of travel? Like what's personally in it for Jordan that appeals to you so much about traveling?
So I didn't grow up traveling a ton. I mean, I think a lot of people in our generation didn't necessarily have that opportunity. And so I had a couple like formative trips where it was just like, wow, this is an exciting moment. But then after college graduation, my wife and I took a 6-week trip. And I think that it pattern disrupts, I would say, is one of the biggest things, to where it's almost like time slows down because the patterns are disrupted. The memories are made so much more intensely when you travel than when you're kind of in your day-to-day routine. No matter how much you may love your day-to-day routine, it's difficult sometimes to make memories in that routine, and the travel disrupts the pattern. And so that was the initial thing that I think we both loved about it. But then traveling with the kids, it opens up like another lens where you're experiencing travel not only through your own eyes and your own experience, but then your kids traveling with you. It's almost like you get twice the amount of time with them in their childhood if you disrupt the patterns and bring them into that experience.
Do you think at their age, because I've always wondered this with little kids and traveling, like, do you feel like they're fully able to appreciate the moment? And if they can, does that even really matter, honestly?
I would say they definitely don't appreciate the moment. Like traveling down the street versus traveling across the Atlantic. Sometimes you're like, this could be the similar experience to a 3-year-old or a 7-year-old or a 6-year-old. But what I think it does is it does help form them as people. And I think that's the piece that, yeah, they may not remember the paella they ate in Spain,
Yeah.
but like the way they're being formed as a person does happen through things that they may not remember. And I think that's part of our philosophy. But they also remember a fair amount. Like a couple weeks ago, my son was making this big black construction. And I was like, what is this that you're making here? And he's like, oh, this is the basalt columns in Iceland. And I was like, wow, that's been 3 years since we were there. But it was
Yeah.
like, I think they remember through photos and videos and things like that as well. But the formation of the person comes out, my theory, in the many years they have in the future, more than the simple moment of the travel itself.
Right. And so that philosophy you have for developing them and preparing them for that future, like what would you say that philosophy boils down to? Like if you're trying to distill down the few qualities or values you want them to really appreciate, what is that for you?
Wow. I would say first and foremost, like I want them to understand what love is and view that from both their relationship with their parents and siblings and family, but also their faith. So it being Ash Wednesday, obviously this is a big day of our Catholic faith. So really integrating what it means to love through faith and family. I would also say attitude and effort. And school's not easy for everyone, and the grades don't always get checked off perfect. But I think those are 3 things that you can control, which would be love, attitude, and effort.
It's awesome. For some of your upcoming trips you shared with me, you mentioned you're going to Spain. You also mentioned that you'll be taking kind of a sidebar trip from there to Vatican City. What do you have planned for that portion of the trip?
So we're headed to Rome, taking all the crew to Rome, and it's going to be a special weekend because it's the canonization of Blessed Carlo Acutis, and one of the first millennial saints, a young man who lived his life for God, and being a parent of 4 young boys, being able to introduce them to who their heroes could be, beyond the great athletes and things like that
Yeah.
that they're exposed to, but someone like Carlo Acutis, who lived his life for God, for others, and now is being canonized a saint due to verified miracles that have been happened by the veneration and prayers through his intercession.
Yeah. That's really special. That's gonna be an awesome experience for you to partake with the family, and certainly having faith being a value that you want to raise your children with and being at the centerpiece of your family. That's gonna be a very special experience. When you think about Carlos and the type of role model that could provide for your children, I got the sense when we had talked about this earlier that perhaps there might be a lack of other formidable role models for them to really, look up to or aspire towards as young kids. Like, do you feel like in today's day and age, there are less role models or aspirational figures for them to kind of strive towards?
I think, the public eye for young kids of who they look up to. I think there's people out there that are, worth celebrating, like they really like Dude Perfect and they make some great trick shots, but I think they keep their content at a certain level,
Yeah.
and it's probably the right level. They get millions of views, and my kids want to make trick shots, but it's not necessarily inspiring them to the potential humans that they can really become. And so I think through your faith, through really the my experience with the Catholic faith, they're able to explore humanity in a different way by looking at examples of lives that have been lived.
That's awesome. One of your articles that really stuck out to me in Substack was the one you'd written about your grandma and how, despite financial hardships within her family, being a single mother, she still created what you referred to as like a generational, basically family. Instead of passing down generational wealth, it was the idea of generational faith, generational family. That time together was invaluable. And that article in particular resonated with me because I took a similar view for my mom and how she'd raised our family. She's also a single mother, three boys. And faith was always the center point of the family experience. And so from your experiences with your grandma, like what specifically are you trying to replicate that you think she did very well within her family setup?
So my grandpa drowned when my dad was 5 years old. So she was widowed with three young kids, and I can only imagine what that was like at that time, where it's early 60s and no real financial resources. And she, at that moment, I think was probably faced, I never talked to her about this, but was probably faced with, where do I go? Like, who do I, self-reliance, reliance on God? And I think it was definitely the latter, where she lived her life from that moment reliant on God. And she did remarry to my grandpa that helped raise my dad. But she was the spiritual leader of that house and continued to be my whole life as a kid, where she entered into our life and brought her faith with her everywhere that she went. So it was just such an example of, like, your faith doesn't need to be separate from who you are, whether that's professionally, or as a parent or as a grandparent. And so to the thought of like generational wealth, oftentimes maybe that be the goal or the vision of how you can set your family up. But she truly left generational faith because of how she reacted in those moments of tragedy, but also then how she continued to live for the next 60 years.
Right.
And my dad was the spiritual leader of our house growing up due to what he witnessed in his own mom. And now I'm trying to be a spiritual leader with my wife in our house. And, I think my boys will continue that generational impact that really started with her and how she continued to call on God both through tragedy and great times.
I think about a lot of studies that you see or research being done now about the decline in marriages, in relationships, even outside of marriage, fertility rates, birth rates on the decline, and a huge increase in society around individualism, probably strongly promoted by social media and a bunch of other factors. Do you find it difficult to maintain your household in the way that you're trying to, with kind of now being somewhat outside the norm of what could be considered societal norms, I guess, so to speak?
Yeah, I think part of it is like we've created our family's society for this to be normal. We 6 years ago moved from a brand new house that we had built down to this house, and for the purpose of building a community that is more faith centric, where our kids are going to a school that's faith centric, where the other families are, raising their kids in a similar way. So for us, it's probably day to day easier right now because we took action to make a bigger decision and move to really intentionally create that life.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It seems easy right now,
Yeah.
honestly, because it's just so ingrained in what we've set up and built. It wasn't always that way though. We were living in, a area where it's kind of a Pleasantville community where it's just like a master planned community and everyone goes to the local public school. And we had just built a house there and we were super excited and happy, but we just felt called to do things differently.
Yeah.
And when the decision to go to Catholic school or religious school in general it's not free in Colorado. So
Sure.
it was a big decision. And when we were making that decision, it was definitely around the community, the teachers, and the people that would surround our kids for the, 18 years that they'll be living at home.
Oh. Earlier today when we were on our run, you were talking about the relationship that you and Katie have and some of the ways in which you complement each other. If you had to distill down to a few key pieces as to why your relationship is so successful, 14 years of marriage, despite kind of what you hear some of the numbers out there in society around divorce rates and things that are super high, like why do you think your relationship is so strong and thriving?
I would say a couple things. Number one, I'd always use the word togetherness, where it's so easy to just be pulled in different directions. And like I take care of certain aspects, and, she would take care of other aspects, whether it's the family. And certainly there's some things like that. She does all the laundry, and I do all the dishes.
Yeah.
So there is some delegation. But when it comes to like the bigger topics of how are the kids doing in school? And they're having a trouble with this issue. How can we support them? Or what is the financial vision of our house, and how do we prioritize these bigger topics? Making sure those things are communicated really well together. How do we spend our time? Who are our friends? How do we, prioritize those relationships? Those are together conversations. So I think that is a major piece of it. The other thing is like the standard marriage advice that you'd hear, but it's communication.
Yeah.
And when you have 4 boys in a house, it's hard to find time to communicate. But I'll give you an example. Every night, pretty much, we take time to get in the sauna together. And so not only is it like great for our wellness and life that way, but it's our time to communicate.
Yeah.
And 2 nights ago, she goes, "How are you doing?" And if she would have asked me that, like while I was making dinner and the kids were screaming at each other and I was stressed from work, I would have been like, "Not good. Don't ask me that right now."
Yeah.
But she waited until like we had that space. So cultivating areas of space to be able to actually communicate. And I think that's one piece that's maybe lost in the marriage advice of communication is like, how do you really create the space to communicate well? And when she asked me that, then I was able to enter into like, gosh, I'm stressed about this. And, this kind of bothered me the other day when you said that, or those types of more sensitive conversations are able to happen in the right space.
Yeah. Are there other ways in which you're creating space outside of sauna time together?
I mean, the sauna is nice. I think it's also for us like dating each other. There was a few years ago when I just realized, gosh, we don't go on a lot of dates.
Mm-hmm.
And we go out to dinner with friends, and she sits with the girls on one side and I sit with the guys on the other. And then at the end of the night, we catch up. That's not really a date, where we're actually having time and space. So one year I tracked that we needed to go on a date every single month, just the two of us. And so that's one of the things I find that I do is like create these little systems to solve for those types of needs. So yeah, I think there's other ways. Every Sunday night, we look at the week upcoming together and say, "Oh, we have that on Tuesday night, and I have an early work meeting on Wednesday morning, so we actually need to leave earlier than maybe you were expecting." That type of thing, where the upfront communication and having carved out space is kind of our trick.
Nice. I do want to circle back to the traveling component. And I think it's really cool what you're doing. For the parents out there and the families who are just thinking that seems insurmountably hard. Like, I don't know how we would do that. We do want to travel. We like traveling. We have 3 young kids. What would you tell them in terms of like actionable things that you think they would be able to try to do to make that happen?
I would say put something on the calendar is the first step, and something that is actually exciting to you and not something that's like, we're going to travel to remove this burden from us. So if trip to Europe with all the kids is maybe too much, then what does a road trip to somewhere nearby look like? And to me, travel provides really 3 different benefits. You have the anticipation. Right now, we're about a month out from this trip, and our kids have been starting to pack. And they're creating a paper chain of however many days it's left. And every day they'll tear off a piece. So it's family anticipation of the trip to come. And then you have the experience while you're there, which is obviously what is most often thought of as what you get with travel. But then you also have the memories afterwards. So I guess my advice would be put it on the calendar and know that it doesn't have to be like a bucket list style experience. It could just be like first entryway of something that you think may be exciting and a fit for your family, rather than, you know, the big bucket list vision.
Yeah. Is this something possible to do on a budget, or maybe families who are a little bit more cost sensitive at the moment? Is that something that, because sometimes travel does appear to be something that might cost a lot of money.
Yeah, for us, 6 flights is not cheap, right? And that type of thing. But we rent our house out while we're gone. And so to me, we pretty much have accommodations for free somewhere else because it's paid for by what we're doing, renting the house out at home. I've met so many families that travel, and everything from retired people who money is not an option or an issue, all the way through families that are saying, like, this is our priority.
Right.
And I would say most people nowadays can travel if it is priority. So how do you shift the priority in order to make it happen? Whether that's selling the house, saying no to the sports teams, doing, no to other experiences in order to make it happen. And obviously there's another wide swath of the world that doesn't have that option. But for most of the people that'll be listening to the Dan Doherty show, I think
which
that would be an option.
Won't be many.
So all 8 of you have a good option to travel.
Mom, are you listening? I don't think she'll be able to figure out how to listen to a podcast, so we might be in trouble. So it seems like integrating with your family, meeting your son, meeting your wife, like you could feel the faith and connectedness of your family. And knowing you and how intentional you are with everything you do, is no surprise that, your household seems to be thriving. And I hate to continue to bring negativity out, but it does seem like from a societal standpoint, there's a lot of issues going on. People are in a lot of turmoil with the political landscape. There's mental health crisis is continuously talked about, and again, the decline in birth rates, decline in relationships, social isolationism. It seems like there's a lot of angst in society right now. And so, like, from your standpoint, what's your outlook on the type of world that your sons are going to be hitting their 20s and 30s going into?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a continuing, evolving world. And I think that's something that I try to view with an optimistic eye, where every generation thinks the next generation is in a worse place than the one prior.
Yeah.
And then if you look up the chain, you're like, we're in a way better place than, what are they talking about? Yeah. And I think if I go into it with an eye of like, how can I support my boys with the things that they're going to face, both from the way that they're being formed today, but also being able to transition from parenting a child into parenting an adult when they do face those things, where I could still walk with them in that is my vision and hope. I think in general for society, like, there's a lack of just seeking the divine. And Arthur Brooks talks about, like, what does it mean to seek things beyond yourself? And for him, he's also Catholic, and like, so that really resonates with me. But he brings in a lot of other faith elements as well, to where it gets an individual out of kind of that consistent news beaten down malaise, because they're seeking things that are greater than themselves. And that's, I think, if I can instill that in my boys, then they'll have a much better ability to face whatever challenges come their way.
And so what does that look like? Is that community service on the weekends, or how do you get them thinking, even at this young age, something that's different than like, I just want this snack, or I want to play this toy? Like,
so I think travel again comes into play there, where you see, I mean, we're in the suburbs of Denver. It's a pretty nice situation we have here. There's, a pretty easy life that they live day to day. But when you travel into a big city in a foreign country, you see things that you're not exposed to, and it opens up different conversations, and it gives you the opportunity to say, hey, Dad, can we give that man some coins? Yeah. So there's those like micro moments when you travel. Again, I think it's like, who are the teachers, who are the friends, who are the families that they're surrounding themselves with? Like, our kids don't play video games. They don't do maybe some of those things that are traditional for the young adolescent. They have very little screen time. They're cultivating an imagination.
Yeah.
And a lot of that happens when you play together with your friends, with 3 other brothers. You have to kind of learn a little sympathy when you have 3 brothers. I mean, you have some brothers. I have 2 brothers.
Unfortunately, my brothers have very little sympathy. So,
so do you hear that?
Yeah.
So I think there's some of that, but there's also, I think having a giving heart is less of like the super impactful moment and more about consistency. So yeah, they make homeless bags and give them out, through the school and things like that. But it's also to say, if you're gonna give a Christmas gift, like you have to pay for it out of your allowance, or not even allowance. I have a whole different philosophy there. But
it's the whole financial world of
out of the money that you've earned, they're making that gift to another person at a young age and realizing what that means.
That's awesome. You mentioned a few of your rules, minimizing screen time, no video games. For the people that might be about to have a child, or maybe considering a family, or just looking for things to institute more discipline in their household with their children, like what are some of the other rules and guidelines that you've set as part of the Jordan Lynch household?
Oof. Jordan and Katie Lynch.
Jordan and Katie Lynch. Sorry.
She would, one of the things that we have done is around that allowance mindset. Because an allowance is like you're getting money for basically living or maybe just maintaining expectations around the house. So we do not do any allowances. What we do is they're expected to do chores and things like that. But if they want to earn money, and I heard this from someone else, then they can do what's called gigs. So they can have unlimited ways to earn money, but they need to work for it. And it's separate from their expectations of day to day. So it's really interesting because they sometimes will be money motivated and they'll be like, hey, well, I want to do some gigs. And what's great is I didn't really rake any leaves this year because they were motivated and I was paying, $1 a bag for the big leaves to be raked up. So there's ways that they can earn money. And what that changes into is a lack of just expectation. Like they're not saying, even at their young age of 10, 9, and 6, like, I need you, can I get this? It's like, right. I don't know, can you? Like, do you have enough money?
Yeah.
And there was a time earlier this year where Gatorade water bottles were super cool and 2 of them had enough money and 1 of them didn't. And then he was like, I want one too. And I was like, great, let's go home and you can work and earn that. So I think those types of frameworks around empowering them would be one of the mindsets that we try to bring to our parenting.
That's awesome. You mentioned that was a tidbit you got from someone else. Knowing you in terms of knowledge attainment, book reading, I would imagine you probably done a fair amount of research to form your child-rearing philosophies. Like, who have been some of the influential authors or models for child development that you followed to kind of model your parenting style?
Well, luckily, I did marry someone who majored in early childhood development.
There you go.
So Katie brings a lot of great ideas and knowledge, and definitely something that we talk about together. I think there's been a book called The Intentional Father, which was one I really enjoyed. The other aspect of just like raising boys is something that I think I have a good network of other men that I can talk to about that topic. So I think a lot of the things I read come into my parenting style, but then it's also learning from other parents that are in it is probably the most useful. And again, having parents that I know. So when my kids do have an issue at school, I know their parents. Like we're able to talk about it. Like, what is the situation? How can we handle this together? How can both of our kids grow from this? I think that's what's been probably most invaluable to our parenting philosophy.
That's incredible. I do want to change gears a little bit here from the family conversation. I know, obviously, we used to work together in software sales, and now you're making a big transition off in the business world. Can you talk through a little bit about your pursuits on the entrepreneurial side of things?
Pursuits, man.
Pursuits.
Weave that in perfectly. So from an entrepreneurial aspect, I've felt like it was something that I've kind of always wanted.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say that after spending 15 years in big company software sales, but I've loved my experience in the big company software sales as well. It's been some of my most, fruitful friendships and obviously great financial reward and things like that. But I think it over the last several years, I felt like I was on kind of 1 year contracts where it was just like, I'm burnt out, but as long as I don't, you know, sprain my mental ACL, I'll continue for another year, almost like an NFL running back, where it's like, these are my peak earning times. I need to just keep it moving.
Yeah.
But really, over the last 2.5 years, when I was able to create a little more space in my career, no longer have direct reports, I was able to really think, what do I want out of my career? And it became less so of like solely financial reward and more so like, who am I called to be and who do I want to display for my kids as
Yeah.
far as someone who's pursuing passions and living more fully and completely and giving of the talents that they have. So what I'm doing now entrepreneurially is started a company called Pursuit Health with the vision of working with really the mid-sized company that doesn't get as much resources for employee benefits, and employee benefits then turning into a real employee health. And I think benefit brokers and different tools do a great job on the financial side, and I certainly want to help there of what is the best way to use the dollars, but how does it actually return employee health at the end of the day on that output? And I think that equation is what is oftentimes not related. It's mostly employee benefits. We need this, but to what end? And I think the piece that I'm excited about as I build the client base is certainly impacting the financial strategy of how to do employee benefits, but then on the output, really changed employee health outcomes.
Right. I'm thinking about the small business and, knowing that, healthcare coverage, employee costs make up around 60, 80% of a small business's total cost in general. There could be a lot of value in finding more advantageous structures there. I think, what would you say to the small business owner who perhaps obviously is juggling a lot on their plate, and they might be hearing this and think, well, I got my broker. He goes to he goes out to market, and if we could save money going to United Healthcare or Aetna or whatever, isn't that plenty? Like, what other strategy would I overlay on top of that?
Yeah, I think going like a small business insurance rarely has a broker who's really active in the strategy of their benefits. I think larger businesses do get some of that support. In the small business, there's other models of insurance. And I think brokers do a great job at brokering insurance, but they don't really broker the models and types of insurance. So there could be PEOs where they're a part of a big group and getting more buying power for their insurance. It could be what's called an ICRA, which is a reimbursement account, where an employee actually has more control to use the company funds in the way that best fits them. So you can imagine a company that has 20 different states and 4 different generations of employees. All of those employees have very different desires for what healthcare should look like. And with an ICRA, you can actually empower the employees to make some of their own health insurance decisions.
Hmm.
And so that's what I work with small businesses on, is saying this is super important because it's a big expense, but it's also super important because it's a major part of your culture and how your employees view that you're listening to them, valuing them, supporting them, with the health outcomes being the end goal. So I guess my shorter answer to the business owner would be, there's probably more models of insurance that you could get a better return for those invested dollars if you're willing to spend a little bit of time researching it.
Awesome. And for maybe those that are using a benefit broker and going out to the market and having someone, negotiate health insurance rates for them, who might be less familiar with the other models, you mentioned ICRA, PEO. Can you kind of briefly describe what each of those models is and how they're a little different?
Yeah. So when a small business goes to the market, regardless of who the broker is, they're not able to get different rates. It's the same insurance, whether you have broker A or broker B. What is different is the model of insurance. So again, the ICRA is really that reimbursement, empowering the employee to make more of their decisions, pick from the broader marketplace for the right insurance for them. So one employee may pick, I want to basic bronze plan and I want to use these leftover dollars for a specific reason. Another person maybe wants the gold premium plan to support their chronic condition that they live with and bring down the cost of care for their condition. So it really empowers the employee to get return out of those dollars. And then the PEO is another one where sometimes a business needs more HR support and you're part of a bigger group to where if you had wrongful termination lawsuit, you have backing legally and HR wise that could support you in that. It also provides that big group and that goes to market for insurance as a big group, as opposed to going to market with the 10 to 15 employees where you really don't have much buying power at that point in the small business space.
Okay. So let me see if I just at a big picture kind of summarize this. So today with small businesses, they're working with either a broker, a PEO, or potentially an ICRA individually, but they're only being exposed to a singular model from a health insurance standpoint due to perhaps the lack of flexibility with the individual model that they're currently operating under. And so you're an overlay that would help them kind of navigate the broader landscape and consider alternative options across multiple models.
Exactly. Yeah. I want to be the advisor that can take this off of their plate.
Yeah.
When you meet with a salesperson, they sell the product that they have, right? Where I don't have a product, I represent the different models of insurance. So I can take their information and go out to the market and say, let's look at a PEO and ICRA and brokering a small group plan where if you're a PEO salesperson, everybody's a great fit for a PEO,
right?
Because that's the only solution you have. And I spent 15 years selling one technology and everyone I felt like had to be a fit for that because that was the only solution that I had. So when I started Pursuit Health, it was really with an idea of, I don't want to be selling a solution. I want to be able to advise a company on what is actually right for them, their company goals, their culture goals, and also educating on models of insurance that could really impact what's available to the employees.
Awesome. Well, do you have like Instagram, social media, or a website where people could follow and track you at?
Yeah, definitely LinkedIn's a good place. So feel free to connect with me there. PursuitHealth.co. I'm going to get the .com.
One of these days.
Yeah, she has a nice business out of Florida, but I'm coming for it eventually. But yeah, PursuitHealth.co is the website.
Awesome. And we'll include the links to Jordan's LinkedIn website and various social media so you could follow and track Jordan's information online as well. Show notes. I want to kind of pull back here to the beginning part of your career. Obviously, you've mentioned starting off in sales. What initially got you attracted into getting into a sales profession?
Well, part of it was the fact that I had barely a 3.0 in college, so that limited some of the options.
Classic sales professional.
Yeah, exactly. I knew how to make the best return on what performance I had in college. It was actually funny when I was graduating college in 2009. It was a pretty tough market to come out of as a new grad, and I did a lot of the standard interviews, and I interviewed with management consulting firms, and never really moved on the initial interviews. So then I decided to take a different approach, and sales was always something that came naturally. I sold newspapers, telemarketing in college. I really enjoyed my professional selling course that I took in business school. And so I was like, I need to approach getting a job a different way. And like, where are people actually getting jobs versus just doing interviews and being recruited that way? And so I competed in the National Collegiate Sales Competition. And that's when I actually started to learn what it was like to be a sales professional, how to sell a mock situation of software. And companies were really paying to recruit out of that. And that's where I met ADP. Mm-hmm. So I had probably a dozen interviews that I did not get an offer from. And then the first interview I had after the National Collegiate Sales Competition, I got the offer. And I think I before was playing like the get a job out of college game. And then I changed to say, what do I actually want? How can I play towards my strengths that maybe not showing up on a simple resume?
Right.
And then when I started playing that game, it quickly turned into a job.
But from what I read in some of your articles, even in those earlier years in your sales profession, even college or high school, You reference different entrepreneurial endeavors that you did, whether it's game console arbitrage or starting a protein shake company geared towards children. There was obviously things and other aspects that you were pursuing entrepreneurial at a younger age. Can you pinpoint anything in particular as to like why so much interest in entrepreneurship or sales in general?
Gosh, I think there's probably a few reasons. I mean, I saw my dad be laid off after 19 and a half years of employment at a company. And it happened when I was, maybe a freshman year of high school or something like that, where it was just a very formative age to be like, what is the real relationship that people have with companies? And it's certainly not familial like it's advertised as,
Yeah.
like you are a utility. And at that point, I was also raised in a household where a work ethic was very valued and very important. So I always had jobs in high school, and I quickly realized if you work an hourly rate, you get paid hourly, and your earnings are capped. And if you do something entrepreneurial, like the game console arbitrage that you're referencing, when I spent 2 days in a Walmart trying to get a PlayStation to sell on eBay.
What was the net on that?
I made over $1,200.
No way. Wow.
So
impressive.
My hourly rate was maybe I was 48 hours of effort.
Oh yeah, I guess
so it was down, but it was still more than working an hourly job.
Sure.
At $20 an hour, I still made more than that by doing something entrepreneurial. And so I think I started to realize like the equation can be different if you're entrepreneurial from a money aspect, but also I think I've always just had ideas. I've always had interest in business and interest in doing these different little side hustles. And for a long period of time, when I was working in corporate life, it just stayed as an idea. And I felt like I was early to different trends, but it stayed as an idea where the people who took action on those trends are the ones who are entrepreneurs. I was a wantrepreneur, right? Like I wasn't actually taking action. And I think in the last few years, I've kind of realized that in order to be an entrepreneur, in order to change a career trajectory, it's less about the idea and more about the action that's taken.
Yeah. And earlier in the conversation, you referenced transitioning to a role to create space and time. You also referenced, I don't know if it was saying in this conversation or earlier when we were running, but you referenced feeling like you're being called to something higher, right? Being in tune with God's purpose for you. I guess a couple things. One is, can you walk me through the point of when you decided you wanted to make the jump, how you created time and space to really go inward and identify what you wanted to do? And I'm thinking of like perhaps current professionals who are in executive level positions or leading teams that might feel like they don't even have the time to think of an idea, right? To even take a couple steps that they could take to take action now to at least make a directional shift in a different entrepreneurial pursuit. And then the other thing is, how did God play into that? Like how did you actually get in tune with God's message and purpose for you?
Yeah, I think it encapsulates so much of what we've been talking about, where the ways that it kind of came about were it's kind of always been there simmering without action being taken.
Yeah.
So a few years ago when I was leading multiple sales teams and we were the number one team in the country, I just didn't enjoy it. I felt burnt out. And no matter what sales performance or commission checks were coming in, it wasn't life-giving.
Yeah.
And there's this article called The Magic Window, where you really have a magic window of time with your kids. And so I read that and I was just like, I want to just spend time with my kids and I'll figure this career stuff out later. And so I went to the employer and said, hey, I'm going to leave. And I was number one team. And they said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know, but I'm going to leave and I just want to travel with the family. And I was so fortunate because they said, well, rather than leaving, why don't you just take 2 months off and travel with the family? And I said, well, okay, that sounds great. Like, good deal for me. I wish I would have thought about that, but thank you for offering. So we did that. And I came back into a different position where I did have that space. And I think of my prior role of having Zoom call from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And it wasn't hard work, but it was mentally taxing. I didn't have space for other things. And the new role, I had a lot more space. So I was able to start different kind of ideas and pursuits. And I started a Substack. And I started putting my ideas not only just stuck in my brain and started putting them down in paper and then sharing them. And I think those early acts of actually sharing them was the example of action being taken. So I guess my advice to anyone that's thinking about a career change is like, number one, what action can you take, even if it's small? Like maybe it just means posting on Instagram and being a little more vulnerable and not just scrolling on Instagram, but getting involved in the creation. The other piece would be like, who are you surrounding yourself with from an influences standpoint? Whether it's other people who are taking action or other people whose calendars are filled with Zoom calls.
Yeah.
Like you're going to become what you surround yourself with and what's celebrated within that social group. And sometimes it means, remote authors and things like that you can surround yourself with from a content perspective. Like The Pathless Path was a big book that I read where it really, he left his management consulting track into just traveling and writing and lives this example of you don't need a lot to get by if you choose to live that way. And so those types of content creators and people that I've surrounded myself with made it much more easy for me to take the jump of leaving a 15-year corporate track and getting more comfortable that is the only option as opposed to feeling like trapped in that corporate environment.
Right. And you've mentioned, God and faith as part of that, as part of this as being part of your purpose and the direction you're going, something more meaningful, So can you talk about that a little bit? Like, how do you feel like God has spoken to you, why this is your purpose, or what meaningful ways you made this connection to go ahead and take these steps now?
So again, I think it's creating the space first and foremost, where how do you hear God if you don't have the space created to hear? So I think that's part of it. I think one of the messages I always told our sales team was the Bible verse, to whom much is given, much is expected. And once I had space, that verse called out to me in a very different way, where it's like, it's not just who's given opportunity in a sales environment and you're expected to deliver upon that, but it's really like, I have so many blessings in my life. I'm expected to make sure those come to fulfillment.
Yeah.
And I think getting a comfortable relationship with that makes it easier to take action. So I would say it's something that I go to mass 1 to 2 times every week. And again, with 4 boys, prayer isn't always quiet. My day does not start with an hour of silence and prayer. But it is finding those times in mass and finding those times of silence to call out and ask those types of deeper questions and then pause in the stillness and space that you've created.
That's awesome. You mentioned, obviously, entrepreneurship being something that you've felt like has been a calling for you, but that there was a point of inaction, like entrepreneurship. If you could go back in time, would you change anything? Would you do anything different? Would you have done anything sooner or differently?
Probably in some aspects. Like I think I did sit on the sidelines longer than I should have. Now, in hindsight, it was great. Like I was given so much and I had such great results from that time of maybe inaction or action in other aspects. But I think there is a bit of like, I should have taken action maybe sooner. And I think some of that motivates me now to be like, this is a moment to take action.
Yeah.
When I first started the business, I reached out to an entrepreneur who I really respect, and he's actually the founder of the company who made our sauna, Sisu Sauna. And I was just telling him about what I was doing, and he just looked at me and said, "Wow, what a privilege!" And it just hit me like it with such a different weight, where it's like, now I have this privilege and I have taken the action, but it's a privilege and I have to continue to take the action. And so I don't know if that is full regret or not, but I definitely feel like in the moment right now that I have a very privileged situation that I'm excited about.
Yeah. And you're not the first one in the family to take a step towards entrepreneurship. Obviously, Katie runs a clothing boutique. And can you talk a little bit about what you've learned in terms of seeing her operate her business and from entrepreneurship?
Yeah, well, she was a teacher out of college. We quickly had two boys, and it made sense for her to stay at home, and that was kind of always the plan. And what she was excited for was to be a stay-at-home mom. And then after a year or so, it was like, gosh, I'm just feeling tugged in other directions to have other pursuits going on. And so we kind of had a conversation around like, well, what does that mean? What do you want to do? And the result, she's always been good at shopping. So a clothing boutique was a natural transition. And she just celebrated her 7th year of business with that. And so what I think it's done is it's enabled us to, again, have great communication together, where it was never like, you go do your boutique and that'll be great for you. It's like, I have to kind of support the boutique in certain Saturdays. If she's doing a big sale or a big party, then it means she's not around on the ways that we would normally expect it within the family. So there's communication aspects that have happened. But the other thing that I've really witnessed through her business is the act of giving. So she does a great job with curating styles and things like that. And, that's amazing. But what she also has done is given over $30,000 worth of clothes to a homeless shelter that she's partnered with. Wow. So it's business and it's great, but it's also really changing the ways that women interact with clothes. So from that homeless shelter, now women are receiving brand new clothes with tags on and able to realize their dignity in such a different way. So I think her real gift has been certainly curating styles and that sort of thing, but really cultivating a community that supports her vision of giving back as well. And I think that's what excites me about the next part of my career is like not only the financial gain, but how can that turn into impact as well. So that would be things I've taken away from her.
Awesome. Now, we've talked a lot about family and the business side of things. I do want to segue into fitness topic. And I think it's interesting when you talk about pursuit health and some of the things you're passionate about. There does seem to be a bit of an intersection between your past life and some skills you've attained in sales and the particular things you were selling, and also your interests, personal interests in health and fitness and how that ties into your approach with your family, and also now blending that into something that is also a business as well. And so there's something really authentic and personal to you there that I think is super cool and clearly very much inspirational for you. What type of things are you doing health-wise this year as a family and as a group?
So from a health perspective, obviously we're in this space, that is a gym that we really created over the last couple of years to be a special, intentional place in our house. And I think that changed kind of how the family interacted with fitness and health. Katie and I have always been into health and fitness. And I think for me personally, like I've worked out probably 4 to 5 days a week since I was 14 and never really missed a week. So like the need for health has been ingrained in me. But what I think I've learned is the difference between kind of low key exercise and actually training for a purpose. Yeah. So over the last year, I've hired coaches and I've learned about how to actually intentionally make progression physically. So I'd say that's something new that we've added. the sauna and the cold plunge, like I said, this gym space. And some of it is certainly just like things that I'm really into, but it's also being a parent of 4 boys and feeling like kids need to see their dads do hard things. And when my kids say, "What does dad do for work?" He he takes phone calls. And so they're not witnessing.
He's always on like the computer.
Yeah. They're not witnessing hard work being done, So when they came to watch me do a high rocks and they're following me from station to station to station and cheering me on and seeing what it's like to see their dad do something really hard and challenging himself, those are the things that I think really stick with them, to where it's not just Katie and I's health and wellness, but it's also seeing my 3-year-old come in and ask me to lift him up on the pull-up bar, and bring it into a full family activity.
Yeah. You mentioned high rocks. For those who don't know, what is high rocks?
Well, I feel like that's a real question since you're joining me. And
it's for people who don't know. It's not for me.
Since you're doing one in 6 weeks, you better learn what it is here. So High Rocks is a functional fitness race. So basically, it's a 1 kilometer loop, and it's typically held indoors, actually. On the infield of that loop is 8 different stations. So you have the ski erg, sled push and pull, burpee broad jumps, weighted lunges, farmer's carry, and wall balls. So after you do a functional station, you run a 1 kilometer. So by the end, you've done 8 different stations and a total of about 5 miles or 8 kilometers of running. And it's just fun. It's just a fun way to train. I've done marathons and half marathons. And for one, I like running, but I like training more. And I've never trained for a marathon, so maybe I should do that as well. But this has so many different dynamic aspects to it, whether it's the skill progression of the functional movements, the building of muscular endurance, the building of actual endurance. It's a fun way to train.
That's awesome. And so I signed up for the half. You're doing the full, right? Is that...
You'll be doing the full.
Yeah, you're man. Well, I'm glad I took notes on what some of those events are, so I'll start prepping for it. You mentioned a pursuit. You talked about hard things physically. Obviously, this year doing high rocks. You've mentioned this idea of having a challenge, an annual pursuit that you're intentionally prepping for. Can you talk to me about that practice? Like, what is it, and what are some of the other prior health pursuits, to keep the theme here, that you've done in prior years?
So the idea is called Misogi, and I don't know who popularized it. I think I heard about it from both the book The Comfort Crisis as well as Jesse Itzler. And really the thought is, if you did a physical challenge, or it could be a non-physical challenge, but for me it's a physical challenge every year, that's really so difficult that it impacts the other 364 days of your year. So in years past, I've done 118-mile bike ride over 3 passes and through the mountains called the Triple Bypass bike race. I ran the Moab Trail Marathon 4 weeks after our son was born. So that was an example of when I wasn't trained. I've done other trail runs. I really trained for the High Rocks last year. This year, I'm doing an event called Hell on Hogsback, which is a 12-hour race, basically, but it's up and down a hill for 12 hours, and it's a 1-mile loop up and down. So the scenery, I'm guessing, will get boring, and the experience, though, during those events, again, it impacts the other 364 days, but it also increases the sphere of what is possible that you can do. And I think with different physical challenges, it's like every time you do something, your sphere gets a little bit bigger. You have access to a different capacity, whether it's actual physical improvement, but oftentimes it's mental gains as well.
Yeah. Well, a couple things. When I was in Argentina, I ran to a group. It was a group, probably 5 or 6 men that were all around 50 or so, that was participating in Misogi, and they were doing it in the W Trek, so the place I had just come from probably a month prior. And a couple of things stuck out to me about that. It was one, it was so cool to see a group of guys with families, with professions, with careers, who were still prioritizing time to do something together collectively and participate in this tough challenge, but also to see at their age, around at or around 50, all of them were in, seemingly very good shape and, were pumped to take on this adventure. And so from my perspective in taking this kind of year off and going through my own personal journey and traveling the world and doing kind of high adventure, high intensity things, it was cool to see what longevity can bring at later stages in life, and that these things, if your body is taken care of appropriately, can still be appreciated later. And I thought you'd find that interesting because I thought about you. As soon as you say it's like I'm doing Misogi, I'm like, oh, I know what that is. But for some reason, I confused it with Ikigai.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was like, oh no, I think that's Ikigai. And he's like, no, I'm pretty sure it's Misogi. I'm like, yeah, whatever. But naturally, I was wrong.
Whatever. It seems to be working out for you.
But then in this year, like last year I did Kilimanjaro as my Misogi. This year, High Rocks is my Misogi. And it's already had a big impact, right? And so even when I was out on the trail doing the W Trek, like I was thinking about my pace. I was running the flats or jogging the flats, I should say. And so I was being more intentional about how I'm keeping up with my cardio. And my weightlifting and training has evolved and adjusted over the past couple months. And I've already seen differences in how I'm performing and acting and feeling. And so it's been cool to take a more intentional approach to fitness, because for the past, 6-7 years, I've just kind of been like in the gym, like, all right, I do a 20-minute cardio thing and then go lift.
I call it lazy lifting.
Yeah.
Where it's like, it's still good for you. You're still getting, a little bit of action, but it's a few sets, a little bit of scrolling on the phone.
Yeah.
Call it.
Go hit the sauna for 15 minutes. Yeah. Health protocols. I know obviously extremely disciplined in a lot of aspects of your life. What are some of the ways you're disciplined when it comes to fitness, the standards you set for yourself?
So right now, and really for the last year and a half or so, I have been really more training for High Rocks, where physically I'm doing usually about 4 to 5 runs a week, a total of 25 to 30 miles of running. Usually a lazy lifting day where it's kind of like a total body lift, and then a high rock simulation or two where it's kind of running, alternating with some station work. So kind of that high heart rate work. So the training has been a higher volume. I would say I carve out about an hour a day for training. And so that has increased a little bit compared to what I had been doing. I think the other aspects have been the sauna and the cold plunge. So every night, if we're at home and in our kind of normal routine, which is 5 or 6 nights a week, my wife and I sauna for 20 minutes, and then we cold plunge for 3 minutes, and then we go back in the sauna for 20 minutes. And so 45 minutes a night, we are taking care of that aspect of our health, but it's also a big relationship health aspect as well. And then after that, we go to sleep quick. Sauna, I really feel like one of its biggest impacts is on sleep, at least for us. So we sleep really well. And I think I, on average, sleep 8 hours a night.
That's incredible.
I go to bed at 9:45 and wake up at 5:45. And that's kind of my normal schedule. From a diet aspect, we eat really quite clean. My wife is celiac, so that kind of helps limit some of the options that I otherwise would be selecting. Since, a lot of the gluten sweets don't come into our house. But yeah, we cook and eat at our table as a family 5 nights a week, I would say. So, and a big part of that is, again, the boys are entering into our world and our schedule, and we certainly have sports and other things that they're doing, but it's still revolving around our schedule. So an example of that is I coach the boys' sports, so I can pick the practice times. And I coach the boys' sports so the younger boys can participate with the older boys. And rather than it being running around 5 nights a week, we're practicing 2 nights a week, and the younger brothers are coming along and participating, and then we're still home for dinner at 5:45. So I think controlling some of what comes into our family's routine makes a big impact on our health and wellness too.
Yeah. Sleep things and sauna benefits. I want to get into this a little bit. So cold plunging, I've formerly have only really done probably in the morning to mid-afternoon, because I've heard it can have a negative effect on sleep, but maybe the sauna is counteracting some of that for you. Um, Aside from sleep benefits related to the sauna and the cold plunge, have you seen anything else that you've found to be beneficial since you've undertaken those protocols?
Yeah, I mean, some of it's anecdotal.
Yeah,
Obviously, the N of one being me
yeah,
and my wife, but like I really haven't gotten sick
yeah,
um, at, at the same frequency that I was the couple years prior. So I think some of it is immune related, flushing out those types of toxins and things like that. From a cold plunge aspect, I think the science is relatively limited on like what it's actually doing.
yeah,
Is that beneficial? Every day you're choosing to like get in cold water, which isn't fun. So I guess maybe it's clear there's some mental resilience that's being built. The other reason we do the cold plunge is just to be able to do 2 rounds in the sauna.
yeah,
So you're able to do 20 minutes again when you have just sat in 40-degree water because you're so cold you want to go warm up again. So I think that's why it does go back to being able to sleep pretty easy or kind of taxed in that way. From a sauna perspective, the way that I think about it is it's kind of a easy way of getting high zone 1, low zone 2 cardio aspects. You
yeah,
know, your heart rate's getting elevated. So you're getting that kind of easy workout almost in a way. And then the other science around it is it's good for so many things, but Alzheimer's prevention, perhaps that
mm,
is in my family, and I do have genetic disposition for. It's great for just like heart health, brain health, these other aspects that is a priority for us on a daily basis.
yeah. How is the family history you just mentioned around Alzheimer's like affect your approach to health and wellness and really everything you do?
A ton. Yeah. I mean, I've seen my parents as well as Katie's dad have either chronic conditions or kind of shock diagnosis um, in their early 60s. And I don't know that it's necessarily things they could or didn't control at a younger age, but it definitely motivates me to take a different view of my health now with a vision of being able to have a different relationship with longevity. And the cool thing is now there's so much more proactive things that can be done. Like I know I have a gene that makes me more susceptible to colon cancer. So even though it was early, I got a colonoscopy last year, so there these types of things that if you're aware and doing the testing, you can take action on. And so I think some of it is like, what are the aspects that Katie and I are actually measuring and taking action on? And then not freaking out about it. Everyone's born with their own genetic code, but you can take action.
Yeah.
And that's really our philosophy is, the fitness side, the mobility side, the nutrition side, but then there's this other aspect of kind of proactive care. And we really try to do that as well.
Yeah. And I even see that tied into your interest in pursuit health, right? It's like I could tell when we've talked about this previously and here today too. It's something bigger than just helping advise companies on, potentially cost savings or how to deliver the best healthcare for their employees, but it's also about how to get employees more engaged in leveraging benefits to be more health conscious themselves. And I think based on what you're saying, it sounds like a lot of that is tied into that entrepreneurship endeavor as
Definitely.
well.
It's
Yeah.
definitely like the lived experiences of what I've seen, but it's also just the lived experiences of seeing American society where our healthcare is over double any other nation
Yeah.
and our health outcomes are worse.
Yeah.
So eventually that equation has to change. And I think there's going to be, and I guess my question is like, what is a business's role to help change that equation for their employees? And they probably don't have someone on staff that is viewing it that way.
Yeah.
And so my background of what I've seen with my own family is motivating me, my background in health and wellness. And then, like you said, the ikigai, not misogi, is like that Venn diagram of what is at the center of what kind of I'm uniquely positioned to add value
Mhm.
and enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Pursue Health comes in.
That's so incredible. I feel obviously doing different things, but similar in that I feel like I was in a place where there was some misalignment between purpose and actions and things going on in personal life and taking steps now to realign on those fronts. And once you get in that spot where I feel like you're in the middle of the Venn diagram and you have some things that overlap your skills, your interests, and purpose, and kind of it ties into service to others. And it feels really good to be in that spot. And so I'm excited to see what comes of it for you.
Thanks, man. Well, you've been a huge support, so I appreciate that.
Yeah. I did want to end with this closing tradition, a little bit more of a funner game, hopefully. But I want to do a rapid fire game if you're interested.
All right.
So, what's your favorite book and why?
First one that comes to mind is the book Wanting by Luke Burgess. And the why is it's about mimetic desire. So what are the things that we actually are wanting for our life and how it's typically mimicking the other influences that we have.
That's a good one. I did read that one on your recommendation. I liked it a bunch. If you could have dinner with any any historical figure, I'll add in sports for you.
Okay.
Yeah. Who would it be?
All right, I'll give you a very obscure one. When I was becoming Catholic, I sought out a saint, and he's actually the patron saint of Switzerland, Saint Nicholas of Flue. And the reason why I chose him was he lived so many kind of unique lives. He was a great family man. He was a great in business, great in politics, and he ended his life basically as a hermit. And so I think people that have lived multiple distinct chapters to their life have interesting stories.
Very cool.
That's about as obscure as you can get.
Yeah, I'd say so. What's the song that always boosts your mood?
Oh, I am not the most musically gifted or interested person. Katie knows music well. My boys know music well. I would say anything that my sons are singing. My middle son has a great way of lip syncing. And regardless of the song, he puts on a solid lip sync. So that would be the ultimate mood booster for me.
Awesome. What's the best piece of advice you've received?
I guess I'll just go with like a Jocko quote, discipline equals freedom.
Yeah, I could have figured. I was on Jordan Lynch. We worked together for like 3 years or something like that. And we heard that quite a bit. Discipline equals freedom, yeah. If you could travel anywhere in the world right now, where would you go?
Well, it is Spain. It is Morocco. It is Cologne. It is Rome. Those are the ones that we have on
living it.
The next 3 months. I would say on our short list would be to get to Asia. So I have not been to Asia. My wife has not been to Asia. So that may be a hint at some of our plans for 2026.
Okay, nice. Maybe have a Masogi there or something.
Hey, there we go.
Ikigai.
For
sure. What's a hobby you always wanted to pick up but you haven't?
I guess it would be maybe something non-physical. Like I feel like my physical hobbies are pretty dialed in. I ski a lot. I run a lot. I work out a lot. I've always had visions of becoming fluent in Spanish, and my Duolingo attempts right now prior to going to Spain have been fairly miserable. So I would say becoming conversational in Spanish.
Okay. Go-to comfort food?
Pizza.
Nice. What's one word that describes you best?
Focused.
You've already dropped 2 today. What's a quote you live by?
So I dropped to whom much is given, as much is expected. The other one that I will say again is what a privilege.
Yeah.
And I think that when he said that to me, he just came off so genuine. And I would say I'm really trying to live that way, where if you say what a privilege to the different situations that face your way, whether it's the tired 3-year-old who needs comforted, it's like, what a privilege compared to like, oh my gosh, can you please go to bed? Like, I think that reframe has really helped me.
That's awesome. What's your favorite way to relax after a busy day?
I mean, the sauna's hot, so you're about to experience
We're about to go figure it out.
Yeah, that's the way. That's the only way for me.
Awesome. Well, Jordan, I want to thank you for taking the opportunity to be the first guest on the podcast. I also want to thank you for sharing your insights, your house with me, getting a chance to meet your son and Katie, and also sharing your insights with the audience, taking the time to be vulnerable, share your approach to fitness and family and business. And it's certainly been greatly appreciated. And I'm sure the audience got a lot out of it today. I also want to take the time to thank you personally, because you've been just an amazing influence and role model for me professionally. You're the one that gave me my first sales role, my first sales manager role. And I feel like I've always tried to incorporate a lot of lessons and advice from you. And you've been extremely influential as well in terms of my transition out of corporate America and different advice on books to read and ways to think about purpose in life a lot differently. And so I'm very appreciative of our time together. And I look forward to seeing all the success you're going to have with Pursuit Health.
I love it, man. Well, thanks again for making it happen. And I'm excited to be on this journey with you and running in parallel paths. It's pretty exciting.
Awesome, man. Appreciate you. Yeah. Thank you for tuning into the episode. Hopefully you got a lot out of today's conversation with Jordan. As we wrap things up, I wanted to put some closing thoughts on our conversation and also give a preview to what to expect in the next episode. And 3 things stick out to me from my time with Jordan and getting to know him and his family a bit better, and that I wanted to share with the audience. And that all pretty much revolves around relationships, faith, and leadership. And, Jordan, in our interview, he talked about communication and togetherness being the foundation for what has led to a strong relationship with him and Katie. But what wasn't discussed on camera is something we discussed when we were actually out on our run, was the ways in which Katie and him complement each other and how their different strengths and weaknesses blend together to make a stronger household. And I think one of the examples he used was, he tends to be more introverted and she is more of an extrovert. And it got me thinking about, my dating history and leveraging some dating apps and how really everything with dating apps or even in some social circles tends to want to drive towards compatibility. But that actually, from what some research suggests, is that complementary relationships tend to be more stronger and longer lasting. And so it's something that I was going to take forward with me into consideration as in my dating life personally. Another thing that stuck out to me was the faith aspects. And one element that he discussed, not in conversation, again, this was off camera, was this idea of overcoming the illusion of perfect timing. And this kind of centers around the entrepreneurial pursuits that Jordan's taking right now and how he kind of deferred those for a couple of years. And the thought process was that as he continued to build some passive income, at the point down the road, it would be financially more advantageous for him to make the jump. And, fast forward to the point in time where he did make the jump, actually, some of those investments hadn't really materialized in the way that he had hoped. And it got me thinking about a time where my mom actually talked about this when I was growing up, was, this idea that there's never the perfect time. And the story that she used was a time when me and my brothers, we wanted a dog. And my mom, trying to manage a household, a single parent with 3 boys and full-time work and managing school, the idea of adding a dog to the mix was certainly stressful, to say the least. And, what her dad had told her at the time was that there's never a perfect time, right? And that was really what helped her overcome her own objection of getting the dog, which obviously we were super grateful for, and has always stuck with me in terms of actions that I have taken is recognizing that when we tell ourselves that, this time next year I'll have less responsibility or less things on my plate or more time for this or that, it's usually not true. And it's also deferring responsibility and decision to a future state that isn't guaranteed. And so when Jordan was really at the point where he realized this illusion of perfect timing, how it doesn't really exist, how he helped overcome that was by putting the fears, doubts, and uncertainties he had with a higher power. And that too also, super resonated with me. And I could think about how that helps alleviate, the physical and emotional weight you can carry on your shoulders when you do something like that. And then the last thing revolves around his leadership, and it ties into really his approach with the family or some of the examples that I give, but it's certainly something that, he did also in his professional career as well. And it's how he basically models the behavior that he expects. And, and thinking through the gig economy structure he put together for his children, he also talked about how when they're a little older, he wants to basically help them start and run their own business. And he's already modeling some of that behavior today and incorporating it through the structure that he set up. But in each area, whether it's with entrepreneurship or, as he also mentioned, doing tough things, it's something that he's doing from the front. And I think in a culture where leaders can sometimes get in a position, particularly in corporate America, and certainly in any context, can get into a position where they provide direction or insights, but don't necessarily model the behavior, whether it's because they don't want to or because they're not capable of. It certainly creates a better working environment when the leader or the person you're aspiring towards can actually model and demonstrate the things that they're talking about or espousing from a belief standpoint. Tough things, that was a cool point. I'm glad Jordan talked about the tough things he's doing in his life. It's actually something that I wrote about in one of the articles before the podcast drop. It's something that I've reincorporated into my life, is taking these steps towards doing tough things. And it also ties into what we'll cover in the next podcast. And so I'll have Hugh Vail joining us. Hugh is a founding member of Mustang Medicine, which is a company that runs retreats for anyone, but they do largely also work with first responders and veterans. And they incorporate a handful of modalities, including cold plunging, breath work, yoga, equine therapy, all in very unique ways to help people heal traumatic experiences, help them gain control of their nervous system, understand the physiological benefits of incorporating each of those practices into your physical fitness regimens. And I'm going to sit down with Hugh. I actually spent the whole weekend with Mustang Medicine doing one of their retreats after I left Jordan's house. And we'll spend time getting to know Hugh a little bit better, the work that Mustang Medicine is doing, and also diving into some of the physiological benefits of the different modalities that they use to help people overcome trauma. And looking forward to that episode as well. All right, until next time. Last thing, comment section. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening to the podcast, whatever platform you're watching the show on or consuming content, leave a comment. Let us know what the takeaways were for you from the show. What's your Misagi going to be? What entrepreneurial ideas have you put off that you're going to now pursue? Or how are you instilling discipline and ownership within your household? Would love to definitely hear your feedback, comments, any recommendations or things you would want to hear from the show going forward. Until next time, have a good one.